Now, we're talking about consumer confidence because it may affect what people buy, but what kind of purchases can you follow which will give you a very, very good perspective on consumer demand? I mean, obviously consumers buy a lot of stuff. We went up today to the cafeteria and we bought lunch. I mean, people buy a lot of stuff. So what about lunch? Well, that may not necessarily swing the economy one way or the other. But there are a number of areas which are very important. One, we're going to look at autos. Automobiles, easy numbers to get. Very important industry. I mean, think of all of the goods that depend on autos, right? Steel, glass, rubber tires, fuzzy dice. There's a lot going on when it comes to autos. Also, residential construction, we're going to take a look at that. Because obviously with residential construction, there's the building materials and everything else, right? Okay, so let's take a look. New vehicle sales. Now, we used to say auto sales, but now we say vehicles because so many of the vehicles are not passenger cars. There's the SUVs and the pickup trucks and the vans, which is about half of the total. So we say new vehicles. I want you to look at how strong the new vehicle sales have been in the last 5 years. It's not just that the number is high, it's that it hasn't fluctuated. Look at how cyclical that industry was a couple of decades ago, in the 80s and in the 70s especially in the 70s. It was a very, very volatile industry. Lately, it has not been. And the next thing I want you to look at is how little the industry fell, how little sales fell in the recession of in the recession of 2000, 2001. Why did sales fall so little?
Low interest rates.
Because the manufacturers stimulated sales not only with the availability of low interest rates, but they also used the financing as a loss leader in order to attract sales. So the interest rates fell, and then the manufacturers piled on and offered low rates as a loss leader in order to maintain customers. And so the automobile sales, new vehicle sales, very strong. We're going to look at the latest numbers. Yes, sir.
When you look at a chart like that, at what point do you say to yourself, well, that spike here and that spike there really aren't indicative of the norm? At what point do you drop those out and just say that's stable?
Okay.
Or is that just purely a judgment on your part? Did you see a little blip, and I was wondering.
A couple of things. First of all, you'll notice millions. This is seasonally adjusted and annual rates. Be very careful when you find data on auto sales or anything else. Don't go with the percentages. Always get the number. Seasonally adjusted and annual rate. That's how this is reported. Very often the newspaper headlines, you'll get the figures reported in percentages, which can be misleading because the percentage, whether it's large or small, is only relative to the base from which you begin. So that's number one. So always get the numbers seasonally adjusted and annual rates. Seasonally adjusted because it means you can compare summer to winter. Annual rates because you will always report it on a consistent basis. Now, to get to your question, sometimes the rates spike up because all of a sudden there's been an introduction of a new incentive. Example, the loss leader interest rates that were first offered. I think it was in the fall of 2001. In the fall of 2001, this thing spiked to over 20 million at a seasonally adjusted annual rate because of the loss leader interest rates. Sometimes the figure will dip extraordinarily because there was a strike. So the problem is, even though these are seasonally adjusted, not all these vagaries can be removed. And so what you need to do is to take each month's figure with a grain of salt. In other words, you cannot just assume every time there's a spike or a dip in the latest month that that's it. You really should take a several months figures running before you say, well, we have a trend. And that's why I like to use the historical data. I like to use the historical data because it gives you some kind of benchmark from which to measure what the latest is. All right?